welcome back to Life Enrichment with Hank Ballinger. Today we want to talk about not paying everything off. Now I know that years ago, especially like when I was growing up, I grew up in Jackson County, Kentucky, very rural area. The idea was you get everything paid off and then you'll be doing okay. You pay your house off, your cars, your farm if you have one, your tractors, your implements, your cattle, everything. You try to pay everything off, and that's the goal. Well, that used to be the goal, or it may still be some people's goal, and that's fine. But I want to show you something today why that may not be optimal if you're wanting to build serious wealth. Okay, if you're wanting to build wealth, now not that that's not a good goal, if you just want to get everything paid off and have everything paid off and live comfortably to where you have very small bills, not a bad goal. But if you want to build wealth today, paying everything off is not a good idea. So we're going to look at that idea. So before we get into that, again, appreciate those who watch the channel. If you can, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, encourage others to watch us, and get the news out on Facebook, tell others to watch us. We would greatly appreciate that. Our goal is to help people get out of the rat race, be able to build a good life for themselves, and to be in control of that life. Whatever it is they may want to achieve or whatever goals they may have in life, they can achieve those goals. So that's our goal. So if you can help us, we would greatly appreciate it. Again, the idea of not paying everything off is totally foreign to what many people believed years ago. Now, years ago was totally a different time than today. Let's look at that and see why that is. August the 15th, 1971, if you're going to build wealth and you're going to get serious into macroeconomics and you're going to look at how to become wealthy, that is a date that needs to be etched in your memory, because that is the day that Mr. Nixon, our president, took our money off of the gold standard. Before that day, our money was backed by gold, dollar for dollar. Every dollar was backed by gold. And because America had the world reserve currency, kind of the world was backed by gold. And many countries did what they call pegging their currency to our currency, which means if their currency is pegged to ours and ours is backed by gold, then theirs is backed by gold. And we have the world reserve currency. Our currency is trading all over the world. So our currency is backed by gold. So therefore the world was backed by gold. Very important. But as of 1971, August the 5th of 1971, that gold standard was severed. Now you can pull this up on a YouTube channel, you can look this up on many social medias, and you can find when Nixon went on TV and said, I've told the Secretary of the Treasury to temporarily suspend the gold standard. Now he did say several times in that little speech, he said temporarily. August 15th, 1971, about 52 years ago. I don't know if that's temporary, or maybe he's got a different definition of temporary than I do, but it doesn't seem temporary to me. But nonetheless, I don't think we will ever go back on that gold standard. But let's see, before then, our money was backed by something tangible, by gold. Now, when it's like that, it's a more solid, more steady monetary system, meaning your inflation goes up very slowly because it's backed by something that a lot of people trust. As of August the 15th, 1971, when he took our money off the gold standard, the only thing that backs our money now is the government's word that our money is worth $1, a $5, a $10, a $20, a $50, and a $100. And that's all the bills they make now. They don't make 500 or thousands anymore. They just make up to 100. That's the largest bill. But all the money that we have, it's backed by the government saying it's worth what we say it's worth. Now, that is called fiat currency. That means it's backed by the government. There's no tangible product, not gold, not the the oil doesn't back it, or other types of commodities. It's backed only by the government saying it's worth that. So let's see what happened after August the 15th, 1971, when he took our money off of the gold standard. The amount of dollars has to be backed by gold in a monetary, or if the amount of dollars has to be backed by gold, that monetary system is very limited, meaning you can't just print all the money you want because it had to be backed by gold. And at that time, each ounce of gold was worth $35, meaning we had enough gold to back every dollar that we supposedly in the world buy gold, and at $35 an ounce. So the price of gold was $35 an ounce. It's not the price of gold today. The price of gold right now is around $1,900 and something an ounce. But we still don't back our money by gold today. Money is backed by nothing other than the government's word that it's worth that. So if money or dollars are not backed by anything, the monetary system is not limited. They can print all they want. Could be a problem there. Let's look at this. With no gold standard, the money printing press was turned on, and look out, it was full speed ahead. During the 1970s, that's exactly what they did. They started printing money. They were printing money like it was going out of style. They just turned the printing presses on and let them go. They walked out of the building while the printing presses were going, turned the lights out, come back the next morning, turn the lights back on, the printing press was still going. They just went. But we're going to see a little later on how that causes inflation. Now, the 70s is considered the decade of inflation. Now, why do you think that is? August the 15th, 1971, our money's taken off the gold standard. Our monetary system is not limited. We can print all we want or all we need. So they turn the printing presses on. It's considered the decade of inflation because they printed lots of money. So it will be inflationary. When you print a lot of dollars, that's inflationary. I'll show you how here in just a minute. With a gold standard, inflation was kept relatively small. Before August the 15th, 1971, they couldn't just print all the money they wanted. The gold standard and the amount of gold we had on hand to back that was limited. Anytime you back a currency by gold, I don't care how much gold you have or what price you set on it, you can only print so much money. And if you want to print more money, you have to get more gold to back that. So no matter what, if you back it by gold, it can be limited to the amount of gold you have and the dollar amount you put on per ounce of that gold. Once you take it off, you got to understand, inflation will ensue. And that's exactly what happened in the 70s. Now, a lot of other things happened in the 70s that we're going to get to here in just a minute. But I want to show you how inflation works. Let's say in the whole world economy, there was only $10 ever printed. That's all. And we're going to keep this real simple. There's $10 in the whole world. And in the whole world, what do you do with money? You buy goods and services. So that's what this is, goods and services. But let's say, for easy figuring, that in the whole world there are 10 goods and service. So you have $10 and 10 goods and service. Now, if you have $10 with only 10 goods and services, that means each good or service is worth $1. $10, 10 goods or service, each good or service is worth $1. But what happens if you change the metrics of that system? Let's say you change the system to where you had $10, but now you have $20, but you have the same amount of goods and services. You have $20, 10 goods and service. Now each good and service is worth $2. Do you see how that works? If you make this larger and keep this the same, this goes up. And the same happened in the 70s when they started printing money. Inflation came in like crazy and things went up. Okay? So we're going to look at this here again in just a little bit when we look at what happened during the pandemic between 2020 and 2023. But during the 70s, the baby boomers had hit the workforce. Now, the baby boomers, there were about 76 million of us. I'm at the end of the baby boomers. I was born in 1963. The end of the baby boomers is 1964. Baby boomers was generally around 1946 to 1964, roughly 20 years. And I was at the end of that, and there was about 76 million baby boomers. When they hit the workforce hard. And in the 70s, they started saying, we want jobs, we want jobs, we want jobs. And there was tons of people to work. And they're printing money because he had severed our monetary system from the gold standard. So they were printing money, a lot of money, but there were a lot of people for these jobs, which means all these employers had tons of people to work so they could take their pick. So they kept wages real low. Wages was low, but there was a lot of money, which means inflation ensued. A lot of money, not a lot of jobs. There wasn't a job out there for everybody. And not only did all the men in the baby boomers try to get jobs, a lot of the women now started hitting the workforce, which had never happened before in American history, where women in force, in mass, were hitting the workforce and saying, we want a job too. Well, now you not only got all these men looking for jobs, now you got all these women. That really suppressed the wages during that time. That's going to become very important here in just a minute when we talk about present day. Back then, lots of workers. They were everywhere. They were a dime a dozen. Money, lots of money. Not as many goods and services, so inflation went up. Okay? The baby boomers wanted jobs. And the baby boomers, when they looked at their mom and dad, they said, yeah, my mom and dad had a small house. I want a big house. I want a really nice house. My mom and dad had a car, but I want a car and my wife wants a car. And as soon as our kids get 16, they're going to get a car. And we want the boats. We want the jet skis. We want everything. And they got it. Because there was a lot of money. They may have to work 2 jobs. So now you got 2 people in a house working 2 jobs, whereas you had their mom and dad, the dad working, the mom stayed at home a lot of times, 1 person working, and they got by. Now you've got 2 people working 2 jobs, and they're barely making it because of inflation. It happens. You got to see the metrics. So the men were working, the women were working. There was a lot of money, but the wages were low because there were so many workers. Now, let me show you something about inflation. When inflation is higher than interest rates, that's a good time to borrow money. Now, let me explain that. Let's say you're going to borrow $100,000 today, and a year from now, inflation says, well, you bought a $100,000 property a year ago, but now that property has gone up by 10%. So now that $100,000 property you bought a year ago is worth $110,000. But interest rate that you're paying on that property is at 5%. So you bought that property at $100,000 a year ago, and you've paid $5,000 of interest to the bank. So in a year, you paid $5,000 of interest, but the value of the property went up $10,000. You made $5,000 just because you borrowed money. That's how inflation, being above interest rate, it pays you to borrow money. Now let's look at that a little different, and these are true life numbers. Let's say the interest rate is down. Like I said, I bought some property and I have 3.75% on a commercial. There are some home loans that people got in the 2s. But let's look at just on commercial side. I got interest rates around the let's say 4%. And inflation then was around 15%. So if I buy a property today, a year from now, if I buy a $100,000 property a year from now, it's worth $115,000, but I only pay, because the interest rate's at 4, I only pay $4,000 a year. So it pays me $11,000 per year just for the loan, just to get the loan. That's not including anything that the property brings in, or the appreciation, the depreciation, the equity. It's not including any of that. Any of the phantom income's not even included. That's just to borrow the money. It pays me to do it. See, inflation can be a good thing. It can be a bad thing if you're trying to pay things off, but if you're buying income producing, it can be a good thing for you. Now, when monetary metrics change, you have to be willing to change with them. Now, let me show you what I mean. Remember this illustration? If there is $10 in the world, that's all there is, $10, but there are 10 goods and services, each good and service is worth $1. But if they double the monetary system, or the money supply, to 20, and there's still just 10 goods and services, each good and service is worth $2 now, because this went up. So each one of these is worth double. Now, during the pandemic, here's what happened. A lot of people were paid to stay at home. There were less goods and services. Less goods and services. This number went down. But this number, do you realize, since 1776, since our country became a nation, an independent nation, all the money that's ever been printed since 1776, do you realize 40% was printed in the last 3 years? 40% of all the money. That has never happened in the history of mankind or in the history of this nation. 40% was printed in 3 years. So this number went way, way, way up, and this number went down because people were staying at home. They were being paid not to produce goods and services. So this went way up, this went way down. So don't you think that's going to be very inflationary? And we don't have the baby boomers anymore in the workforce, because they're starting to retire at the tune of about 10,000 per day. When you take 76 million baby boomers, divide that by 20 years, that's about 10,000 per day, even counting weekends, about 70,000 per week that is retiring. So they're coming out of the workforce, and the Gen X and Y is not near as big as the baby boomers, so they can't fill that void. So we have less workers, a lot more money, less goods and services. All of that says very inflationary. There's going to be inflation. That's just the way it goes. So when you look at this, when you look at the idea, the antiquated idea years ago, you pay everything off. If you want to build wealth today, you want good debt. Good debt will make you very wealthy. When you buy income producing property, you probably don't want to just pay it off. As soon as you get some equity in it, borrow from it and buy another one. And when you get equity in those 2, borrow from them and buy 2 more. When you get equity in those 4, borrow from them and buy 4 more. When you get equity in those 8, borrow from those and buy 8 more. You're constantly building up. You don't want to pay all your income producing. Now, a house or cars, those are negative equity items. They're going down in value, not your house, but still it's a liability. Those things eventually you can pay off, but your income producing property, you don't want to pay off. Those things make you very wealthy. Learn how to do it. You can become very wealthy. The old idea, pay everything off, worked back then. We were on a gold standard. We're not today. It's fiat currency, meaning to borrow it, it pays you, and the property itself pays you. You don't want to pay everything off today. You can do this. You can build wealth. You can become Redneck Rich. See you on the next video.